If you're like me and didn't know, Tracy Austin is former tennis child prodigy whose rocket to the top of the sport was impeded by injuries, ultimately ended in a car crash. So David Foster Wallace, who is a great writer, also a regional level tennis player himself, was eager to hear what an experience like that would be from the inside. So he reviewed her memoir, her autobiography, or, her autobiography. It was probably partially ghostwritten, but her autobiography. And he was curious as to like what is it like to be brought down tragically from your place at the top of a sport like that from the inside? What is it like to be inside that person's head? And unfortunately, in the essay, we find that athletes are notoriously inarticulate about their own process. We all see this on a weekly basis in the repetitive and dull courtside interviews at the end of basically every sporting event on television. You say things like, they just wanted it more than us, or, in the second half, we locked in, kept the ball moving, it worked out, or I just have to keep shooting. My shot's okay. I just got to keep shooting. That kind of stuff. So Tracy Austin's memoir apparently reads exactly like this. According to David Foster Wallace, the entire book is a bore. And when she gets to this much anticipated section detailing her recovery from a career destroying injury, she doesn't offer much more than basic platitudes. Quote, I quickly accepted that there was nothing I could do about it. That is her of how she reacted to having her national level tennis career ended by a car crash, which I think, if I remember correctly, that quote, David Foster Wallace talks about that quote like haunting him after reading the essay. And the question that he reaches in his essay is, again, quote, what if that statement is not only true, but also exhaustively descriptive of the entire acceptance process she went through, end quote. And whether this makes her, quote, an idiot or a mystic or both and or neither, end quote. Because although a more tortured mental process would have made for a better book and would have made for a better reading experience for David Foster Wallace, it's hard to say that it would have helped Tracy Austin all that much. The best thing for her to do would be to set about the business of recovering. So the question I put forward at the end of the, not at the end of the email, at the end of this part of the email is, like sinking a game-winning shot or building a brick wall, is the simple act of being human easier when left up to the sorcery of muscle memory?
The whole thing that we're trying to do here is try to figure out how to bridge, I think, mind and body, and try to find a way to be Renaissance men and women. And so one of the great things that David said in wrapping up one of those was, I was complaining about my first job to my dad, forget about what, and he listened to me moan for a few minutes, and then when I had finished, just said, well, I guess that's why they call it work, because I think about that all the time. And something else you told me, David, was I think we were discussing Humphrey Bogart.
That's the two great quotes about work are that thing my dad says, and then Humphrey Bogart, who said, a professional is someone who does the job better when he doesn't care.
That's it. Man, is that hard for an artist to hear, or an aspiring artist.
Humphrey Bogart.
Yeah. We have this idea that creativity springs from the froth like Venus, when in truth, I think it tends to spring from, 1,000, it's a Malcolm Gladwell thing, 10,000 hours of fine-tuning certain creative decisions in a limited environment. So again, necessity actually being the mother of true creativity over time. And these things, just like you get one little piece here of the puzzle, and then 10 years later you get another piece of the puzzle. And so that when you actually see a movie that feels right and everything kind of coheres on screen, it's like it's a eureka moment through 1,000 creative little decisions. It's really not, it is punctuated equilibrium from the outside. It seems like in the blink of an eye, everything changes, but it's gradualism in terms of small wins over time. And that's something that we can actually work on. So at the end of that essay, Tracy Austin broke my heart. I had written this, and so I'll just read it. It's just typical Ford rant. He's not an idiot, okay? But this was a Ford rant, so just take it for what it was. At the end of his essay, he says this, and that those who receive and act out the gift of athletic genius must, perforce, be blind and dumb about it, and not because blindness and dumbness are the price of the gift, but because they are its essence. And so I wrote, prisoner's dilemma, closed ecosystem bullshit. Like an idiot child with an incredible vocabulary trying to describe the Amazon River basin. One can summon moments of blindness and dumbness, aka focus, but it is not the fault of focus that athletes become addicted to its tunnel vision clarity. That is the problem of the subject, not the object. It is the fault of the idolater, not the idol. The emphasis on techne, he talks a lot about techne, the Greek. The person at the top of their physical game was like almost like a god. They were the techne, as godlike, instead of technique or technology, the two things that we can actually learn. It's Humphrey Bogart becoming a professional, it's Harrison Ford developing his acting acumen. Those are techniques. They are not technes. They're not gods among men. They're just people who did the mundane work over time. They learned the rules like a professional so they could break them like an artist. So instead of techne, we can employ technique and technology as performative process. Incarnation renders idols moot. So I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to find a way to dance across spectrums, to have a dynamic human existence that allows us to not just be professionals, but professionals who can create. The problem is a lot of us give up on the desires for our own creative vision when we do the hard work of the mundane stuff. And we just say, oh, well, that'll never happen. And I've witnessed that happen so many times, like family members, stuff like that. They had an idea for a book or a movie or, music or something, but they had, it hurt too much to keep the dream alive. So it's like we need to have some sort of hot box or some embers, to keep the fire going. But it's really the mundane stuff. It's the Tracy Austin being able to say, I accept that there's nothing I can do about it. Like, it's just, imagine the book of Job being literally like, Job being like, oh, well, yep, just time to go back to work. Like, that's the end of Job. Like, the devil's like, wait a minute, like, you're not gonna have an existential crisis? Like, nope, I'm just gonna go, I'm gonna go work in the field now. Like, that's the end of the book of Job.
Job is Ned Flanders or something.
That's it.
Broadcasting live from Flyover Country, this is the Surfing Violinist Podcast.
Keep up. I am more than one thing.
That's right, Judge. I'm in your courtroom. Robo tripping, baby.
Warren Caulfield, punching a hole in a wall.
Breaking news.
Go to the eternal Dillard.
So wrong. You got a baby carrot on
Perpetually in a mall.
Then I won't speak.
The rule you follow, rugged it is. But what use was the rule?